The Pilot Safety Institute is a nonprofit organization dedicated to reducing general aviation accidents by providing free and low-cost safety classes. Our speaker today is Gary Reeves. Gary has over 5,000 hours. He's an ATP, a Master CFI, II, and MEI. Gary is also an expert in Garmin avionics and FlyQ. He has instructed over 200 students and is a Young Eagles flight leader. He's also the 2014 Long Beach District Instructor of the Year and FAA Safety Team Member of the Year. There are 97,000 flight instructors in the U.S. Less than 800 have ever been named Master Instructor. California only has 14. And now, please welcome from Big Bear, California, Gary Reeves.
How y'all doing tonight? I'm actually in my office in Long Beach. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get home to Big Bear this week with my schedule. But I want to say hi, and we'll go ahead and start it up. I'm going to stop a couple times for questions, and I'll definitely let you know. If you have a question at any time, please use the questions feature. The biggest and most important thing is, if you have any problems with the internet, or if we have any problems with the internet, or anything goes wrong anywhere, a recording of this will be online on our website by tomorrow afternoon at the very latest, and you'll get an email when that happens. So let's go ahead and start. This is hosted by us, Pilot Safety. We're a volunteer group. We have just about 10,000 members, but hey, we're always looking for another 10,000. On our website, it's 99% free stuff. There's free safety downloads, class handouts, FAA safety brochures, Ask the Experts, a bunch of free videos. We do have a couple paid DVDs, paid videos, and paid webinars to pay our bills because we're an all-volunteer group. But membership is always free, and there's a ton of free stuff that we'd like you to use. Please visit when you get a chance. Do you want to take just a second and plug the FAA safety team, which I'm a very proud member of? A lot of people ask me when I speak at all the national conventions, do you have to be an instructor to be a volunteer member of the safety team? And I say no. And I tell a story of the young man pictured there with his 182, Robert Baker. Robert Baker did not get his private pilot until I think he was 60 years old. He only had a couple hundred hours, and he did more for general aviation safety and the FAA safety team in Southern California than all of us master instructors and lead representatives combined. He was a huge driving force, and so even a student pilot is always a welcome member of both pilotsafety.org and the FAA safety team. We'd love to have you join, and you can email me for any details. Do have a couple class rules this evening. One, this is an introduction only. I have just over an hour to cover all of your hardware options, 19 features, and the two biggest common errors. We will absolutely not have time to show you how to use these products. It's an amazing product, but to be good at anything, you're going to need a minimum of 2 to 3 hours of training. We just don't have time. This is an overview of the stuff it can do, but we hope you'll get some training with an expert afterwards. Rule number 2, if you ask me about Garmin Pilot, WingX, or Android devices, I don't know. Not a clue. I've never used any of them. I am pretty good at FlyQ. I'm an expert on FlyQ. I'm really good as an expert at FlyQ, but there's only so many things I can be an expert at and still be an expert. So this is really about the iPad and FlyQ. We will not even cover FlyQ Pocket on the iPhone or their new web-based program, which is coming out. So it's a pretty narrow focus, and I will try and get as much done as I possibly can. So why is FlyQ and other similar programs such a good idea? Well, Keeping up with paper charts is hard, but critically important. All VFR products, including a TAC chart, change every 6 months, and every time the FAA changes those TAC charts, they make an average of 100 changes. It's pretty important if you don't know the tower frequency because it's changed. Same thing on sectionals. Being a VFR product, it changes every 6 months. 278 average changes. Hey, there's some new airspace. Hey, there's a new MOA. Hey, the frequency for this has changed. Kind of important to know. The AFD, being an IFR product, changes every 56 days with an average of 825 changes, many of them critical to flight safety. Same thing with instrument approaches. Boy, you better know your decision heights and minimum descent altitudes. They have an average of 75 changes every 2 months, roughly. And of course, low altitude being an IFR product, those low altitude charts change about 75 things every time they reissue. So if you think about it, if you don't have current charts with you, you're missing an average of 1,361 important things to know. This is why FlyQ and other similar products are so important to aircraft safety, because you always have current charts. And FlyQ makes it really easy to know. Let's talk about the FARs though. Remember, FAR 91.103 says every pilot in command before beginning a flight shall become familiar with all available information concerning that flight. Are you required to get a standard weather brief? Yes, for every single flight if you leave the traffic pattern. So if you're here in Southern California and you go from Long Beach to Compton, which is about 5 miles away, you are required to get a legal standard weather brief before that flight. You are required to know everything about all of the airports, including NOTAMs and the stuff in the AFD before every flight. Many people don't, but then when there's an accident, this is what the FAA will hang you on. So you are required to get all this information before every single flight. So can FlyQ legally replace the paper charts, approach plates, and an airport facilities directory? Well, let's talk. First of all, most general aviation pilots are not required to carry a paper chart. You're only required to carry a paper chart if you're in command of large multi-engine airplanes, and occasionally if you fly through special flight rules areas, stuff like that. So 90% of the flights general aviation pilots do, they're not required to even have a paper chart. And they can't even ask to see your chart on a ramp check because there's no regulation requiring you to have one. So they cannot initiate enforcement action against you for having an old chart or no chart because they can't require you to have one. So if you take the issue of current chart databases in handheld GPS, and FlyQ on an iPad is a handheld device, the units have never and will never be approved nor regulated by the FAA because they can't. They can't possibly inspect every iPad and iPhone out there in the country. So handheld GPS units are not required nor regulated by the FAA. Feel better? But wait. If an out-of-date chart, no chart, or an out-of-date database contributed to condition causing the FAA investigation, it's an additional penalty. So this is what happens. You violate somebody's Bravo airspace, and the FAA says, okay, great. Can I see your chart? Oh, well, I didn't carry one. Okay, well, that's a 91.103 issue because you didn't have the information required to safely navigate that airspace. Or, well, I have a handheld device, but I don't pay for a subscription, so the chart information I have is expired. Well, that's an additional penalty. So the FAA doesn't require you to have a chart unless you get in trouble first. Then they add additional penalties to you. So the question is, Hopefully that fixed it and everyone can see my screen now. So the question is, can FlyQ legally replace paper charts, approach plates, and an AFD? Yes, absolutely they can. Why? Because you can show that they're current, and that's all that counts. So let's talk about the hardware stuff you need to have. So here are the iPads that Apple currently sells. FlyQ, like many other electronic flight bag applications, do not support the original iPad 1. You need a little higher processing power. What I carry is the iPad Mini 3 with the 128 gigabyte memory, Wi-Fi only. You should always, if you can, buy the fastest, most memory thing you can, because it's always better to have more processing and more memory than you need than to have it get sluggish when you need it the most. But what about buying the iPad with the built-in cellular, which gives you the assisted GPS? Well, it is a GPS. There is a GPS in the iPad if you buy it with the cellular option. You don't have to pay for the cellular contract. But it's an assisted GPS or an AGPS. And what that means is to get its initial position quickly, it looks for cell phone towers. Unfortunately, that doesn't work well if you're over 8,000 feet or if it restarts in flight. It will work pretty good if you stay under 8,000 and you make sure you get connection before you take off. But if once you're over 8,000 and if it ever restarts in flight, you may not get your position data back. So we really, really recommend that you, if you're going to fly, you want the best you can possibly get. Let's get you an external GPS. One of the things I absolutely love about this is FlyQ connects with so many GPSs. You don't have to buy a GPS for this particular software. Any GPS that works with Apple Protocol is going to work with FlyQ. So you've got a ton of options. You've got 2 from Dual. You can use a Garmin product. You can use a Bad Elf. All of those external GPSs work. And with the iOS 8.4 update that came out today, they all work again. If you didn't hear about that, iOS 8.3 actually disabled most external GPSs, which made it pretty hard on pilots. But the new upgrade today, 8.4, actually fixed all of that. ADS-B. Big fan of ADS-B because you get some traffic and you get some free weather. The one I currently fly with is a Stratus 2. I bought it when I was using another program. It works wonderful. And again, the cool thing about FlyQ is you got your pick of 10 or 12 ADS-B, and they'll all work with FlyQ. So if you've bought something previously for another software program and you're thinking about switching like I did, it's probably going to work. That's the nice thing about this. I do want to talk about ADS-B traffic. So ADS-B traffic is, if you don't have ADS-B out, it's not perfect. So basically what you're seeing if you don't have ADS-B out, but you have an ADS-B in like the Stratus 2, is you're actually seeing those 2 red Cessnas. That's a target for the jet because he's ADS-B out. So you're seeing his targets, not stuff in the range of you. So you may miss stuff that's not close to you. So it's important that you know you get some traffic with ADS-B in only, but not all. So here is a screenshot of my office today. And this is in my plane. I don't have ADS-B out in my plane, but you'll notice as JetBlue takes off, then I get all of his traffic. But I only get it when I'm within range of the JetBlue. As soon as JetBlue leaves, that traffic will go away. So ADS-B in traffic is awesome, but you got to be near somebody with the ADS-B out or pay for the upgrade to your plane. So let's plan a VFR flight. And I do realize I'm going quick, but we kind of need to. So here is the flight plan page of FlyQ. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the From box, and I'm going to enter my home airport, at least where my work is, of KLGB, Long Beach. Then I'm going to click on the To box and put in my home airport, which is Lima Tree 5 or Big Bear, California. Then I'm going to put in a waypoint, and I'm going to put in VPLFX. That's a visual waypoint for a 91605. It's kind of a standard visual waypoint for departure out of Long Beach. I'm going to click on the number on board, and I'll put 2, me and one of my dogs. This is a really neat feature because I live and teach mountain flying. It's critically important that I want to do mountain flying. I always want to stay 2,000 feet above. So minimum altitude, feet above ground level, will ensure FlyQ plans this to maintain 2,000 feet above any terrain I fly over. An amazing safety feature that no other software has. And one of the biggest reasons I switched because I do so much time mountain flying. Takeoff fuel, well, we'll put in 40 gallons. That ought to get me there. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the Create button. It'll think about it for just a second. Voila! That looks like a pretty good flight plan to me. Now, what's interesting is, remember, 91103 says I'm required to get a standard weather brief for every flight I'm going to do. If I click on weather brief, you will notice that FlyQ automatically got me a standard weather brief. It automatically did it for me. I don't have to tell it to get a weather brief. It does it for me. Now, I'm only legal if I actually go through and read it, but I don't have to tell FlyQ to get a weather brief. It does it every single time I create a flight plan. Then if I click on FAA plan, here's all the details. I'm going to click File. I always file flight plans. It's important to finding me if anything goes wrong. I'll click File. It'll think about it. And poof, proof that I have filed it using DUOTS. Okay, let's go ahead and close. If I click in the top right, there's a forward button, a box with an arrow, and that gives me 3 options: email, print, or send to Aspen. The really cool thing about this is if you have Aspen panel, you can actually send this direct to the Aspen avionics, so you don't have to double enter the flight plan. For me, I'm just going to click print, and there is my flight plan. Looks like a flight plan, but I just didn't have to pull out a plotter or an E6B, and it's way more accurate. And there's a copy of the flight plan that I filed. So let me ask you a question. If you're an instructor and your student does this, prints it out and takes in FlyQ to a check ride, is it legal on the check ride? Yes. In fact, in my opinion only, it's required. In any practical test standards, soon to be the Airman Certification Standards, there are special emphasis areas. One of the special emphasis areas is situational awareness. Okay, I got to tell you, it's pretty hard to get lost when you got a little blue moving plane going up the map. Another one is reduced pilot workload. Well, what's easier and more accurate, planning things electronically or on paper? You are always better off using the technology if, and only if, you know how to use it completely. So all of the examiners I know, and I train private pilots from day one on an iPad and electronic flight bag programs. From day one, they're going to use this because it's better. It's safer because it's more accurate, especially in instrument training. If you've ever done your IFR training, it's pretty easy to get lost. You don't know where you are on the approach plate. Again, you got a little blue moving plane. It's much, much better. I will tell you, examiners always will reach over and turn the iPad off about 10 minutes into the flight. They will ask your students to prove that their databases are current. And of course, all of my students are always trained to use the old tools, and they always carry current paper backups because you should. But using the tools, if you know how to use them, is always better than putting a pencil on a map because you're not as accurate. All right, so let's go back to our navlog. I'm going to click the map button in the top right, and this will now put it on the map. And I'm going to show you some basics on the FlyQ map view. First of all, let's talk about that search box. So the top left, it says split screen. This will split your screen into two different map views, which is very handy. You can search airports or create a flight plan from that search box. One thing I really like to do is lock the screen, especially in turbulence. You can adjust the brightness directly from that. You can check for your downloads, and I'll show you how to do that. And before every flight, if you hit the pre-flight check, it will check to make sure you have all the current information. There's a settings button, and there's a really good night mode that's much better than the iPad invert colors. That's not a good night mode, and I would never use it. The night mode in FlyQ is much better because it still shows terrain without inverting weird colors. All right, so let's go back and show you a couple other things. Waypoints are always shown as triangles. One of the cool things I like about FlyQ is that it actually marks your top of climb and your top of descent for you, which other programs don't tend to do. Just looking at a green circle means that airport is VFR. And if we click, we can add as many things or as many layers to this map view as you'd like to add. So let's add just a couple. If I click on personal waypoints, you'll notice I've got a pre-stored waypoint for the Big Bear Dam because that's a standard VFR entry. If I clicked on SIGMET AirMets, they will now automatically appear. A gray one is for instrument conditions. And if I tap anywhere in that gray, the information will pop up about that AirMet, including one of the coolest features I've ever seen, the ability to say, well, yeah, at my current altitude, I'm going to be in that AirMet. That's really, really helpful for turbulence AirMets, which seem to be everywhere in Southern California during the summer. It's really, really cool to see, well, yeah, there's a SIGMET for moderate turbulence, but it starts at 28,000 feet and my airplane will stay far below that. So that sideways or 3D view of the AirMets is really, really helpful when you're flying. If you zoom in, you'll notice that because Big Bear's in my flight plan, there's an orange arrow that automatically appears indicating right traffic for runway 8. Really helpful if you've never been to that airport, because just by looking, you'll know 26 is left because nothing's shown, and runway 8, you know it's going to be right traffic. Pretty convenient. If I actually touch on the Big Bear Dam, if I just tap on that, it'll come up. You'll notice a 3D view of the airspace shows. Now, if I just touch on the bar with Big Bear Dam, it will automatically add it to my flight plan. Going back to the map view, you'll see winds aloft. This is much better than the FAA winds aloft, which shows the direction it's coming from. The FlyQ winds aloft show the direction the wind is actually blowing and the speed. So this is a 5-knot wind going northwest, which means I'll have a little bit of a tailwind going in. Ooh, radar. Remember radar? Just like a stoplight, folks. Green, okay. Yellow, you better slow down and think about it. Red or pink, bad. That's when the pigeons start walking. So I would never actually do this flight. I'm not going to get within 25 miles of anything red when I'm flying general aviation things. ADS-B weather is not current weather. XM weather is not current weather. They've never been designed to be current weather. ADS-B weather, especially thunderstorm activity, can be up to 28 minutes old by the time it gets to the tower, then gets to your device. So please don't ever try and navigate red, pink thunderstorm weather by using an iPad. It's not good enough, and people are getting in a lot of trouble and accidents by trying to do that. If we click on the airports button in the bottom left, you'll see it's pink. These are really handy, just quick information about the airports. If the airport you want is not already displayed, you can enter it in the search box. One nice thing is it automatically overlays the current winds. So you can see what's going to be a crosswind, what's going to be a tailwind, just by looking at the main thing. One of the really nice things about this program is that they put the most important information up first, so you can make a quick decision. Oh, I'm landing on 2.5. That's going to exceed my personal minimums. I think I'll divert to Torrance. So the most important information is always going to come up first. So if I click on the FAA diagram, you'll notice that now it's displaying an updated winds of 13 knots. Well, based on this, when I come in, I'm going to obviously ask for landing runway 12 because that's going to be most into the wind. I'll go ahead and hit close. If I simply now scroll up, I'll get to frequencies. And if I just keep scrolling up, I'll get all of the other runways, including, you'll notice it always shows crosswind 2 knots, crosswind 2 knots. It's going to show you this kind of stuff. It automatically computes it for you. If I click on the weather tab, it brings more than just the FAA weather. If I tap for the 7-day forecast, it's going to bring up a real 7-day forecast. Really nice for planning. You really should start all of your flight planning a minimum of 7 days out. I generally start out 2 weeks on weather.com, but this does at least 7 days right there. It's kind of nice to read through. I'll click on done, send that away. Now if I click on the national radar map, it brings it up. I can zoom, I can move it, I can do whatever I want. You can see some red stuff's building around Southern California, but it looks really nasty north of Florida and down there in Louisiana. I'll click done and make that go right back to where it is. If I scroll up, that's going to bring the METARs and the TAFs in for me. I don't like decoded measures. I really want to read the raw. It's just easier for me and faster. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the raw and get straight from the FAA. This to me is a better view because I can read it all very quickly and still show the winds aloft. So look at 3000, you'll notice 230 at 10 knots. So it's coming from 230 at 10 knots. We'll have to remember that. If I click on procedures, that's going to bring up all of my instrument procedures as well as the airport diagram. You are required to have a current airport diagram in front of you before you move an airplane at any towered airport. People go, well, Gary, is that new? And I said, well, no, that's 91-103. If you have a runway incursion because you didn't have a taxi diagram out, A, you're risking a lot of lives. B, you're in serious trouble. You must have a current airport diagram out in front of you. If you move an airplane at a towered airport, FlyQ and many other programs just make it easy because it's always with you. I'm actually going to click on my instrument approach here at my work airport, Long Beach. If I click on that, it'll bring it right up. If you see a green box around the map view, that's showing that it's actually geo-referenced, meaning I can get a little blue moving map. One interesting thing about FlyQ is FlyQ has been kind of the originator of data. They were the original web-based flight planner. They actually reject some FAA instrument approach plates because they're not accurate enough and will disable georeferencing because it's not safe. Other programs will still georeference because they're not doing the same quality control checks as Seattle Avionics. So if you see a green box on a Seattle Avionics plate, you can really be sure that it's met all of the quality control checks. If I click send that to the map, poof, it brings it right up on the map. And remember that winds aloft 230 at 10? Look at the crosswind just to the right of the Unicom box. That's the winds aloft 230 at 10. You'll notice it also will show you some TFRs. The Disneyland temporary flight restriction is kind of a permanent flight restriction. It's been there since 2001. And the TFR to the north out of Burbank is for some firefighting stuff that's coming on in Southern California. And you'll notice that red buildup in the bottom right that radar is getting a little worse here in Southern California. We had a thunderstorm pass through here about an hour ago. All right, let's stop, and I'm going to start scrolling through the questions and see if there's anything I need to answer. All right, let's just scroll through as many as I can. I know these slides were not playing at the beginning of this. Don't worry about it. We're going to re-record the presentation and have it up by tomorrow night. So let me get through there. A lot of people told me about that. So just give me half a second and I'm going to scroll through there. Okay, here's a question. Hold on just a second. Okay, so Troy. Hi, Troy. Thanks for joining us. I'm puzzled by the comment that iPad and GPS devices are not regulated by the FAA. That is actually true. The FAA does not regulate the use of handheld devices because they're not a required part of the aircraft. There is some regulation for 121 and 135 carriers, but not for general aviation. Here's a comment from Sam. Got Bad Elf suggested not to buy another iPad. It works great. Yes, you're correct. Richard Wrong, how long would you recommend waiting to update 8.4 if you were able to roll back to 8.2? I would do it today. 8.4 works and it works great. Roberto Perdomo. Unfortunately, Roberto, he's asking about using an iPad 1. FlyQ does not work with the iPad 1. David, does traffic need to have a transponder to show on ADS-B, or would it be reported if it just showed up on FAA radar? It actually does. It needs a Mode C transponder. You can find a recording of this video online on our website. Okay, there's hundreds of questions coming in. So at this point, I'm going to stop, go back to the presentation, and then I'll get through back at the end. Unfortunately, time limited, and all of you are asking great questions. I am very time limited on this webinar. Anything we don't answer, you can please email to me or go on our website and submit a question that way, and I will certainly get to it. Okay, so let's do some IFR flight planning. Same thing. Going to enter in KLGB. 2. Let's go to Monterey today. Waypoints. Now this is really cool. I can just put my entire flight plan right in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the Anaheim 5 departure with the Ventura transition to the Henner intersection. Then I'm going to track Victor 27 all the way up to PEBS. Make sure to change VFR to IFR. Number on board, let's make it 2. Make a student do all the hard work while I just sit there. Then I'm going to change my max altitude to the one I want. I want to fly this route at 8,000. Let's put in a little more fuel. It's a little bit longer flight. So let's put in 60 gallons. And I'm actually going to turn off a feature of FlyQ For IFR planning, I prefer it not to optimize for best wind because I'm going to look at a different weather report later and decide whether to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I always set my IFR flight plans to file it at the MEA, and then I'll check for better winds because it may pick a higher altitude for better wind, but put me into potential icing. So I actually want that off for the way I plan IFR. Let's hit create. It'll think about it. And hey, look at that. It put in the entire Anaheim 5 departure. Long Beach, Seal Beach, Wilma, LAX, right to SATI. So if I click on procedures and I look, well, it did what I told it to do. It put in Seal Beach, Wilma, then LAX, then SATI. Unfortunately, if you look closely at the chart, coming off runways 25, I'm never going to go to Seal Beach. I'm going to be radar vectored straight to the LAX VOR. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to plans, and I'm going to delete those first two waypoints. The way you delete something off your flight plan page is really simple. I'm going to click Edit. Then I'm going to click the change dot by Seal Beach and hit Delete. That goes away. And I'm going to do the same thing for Wilma. I'm just going to delete that out of there. So now my flight plan closely matches my clearance, and that's what I'm going to get. I'm going to then click Done. Everything looks good. I'm going to now click Display on Map. And look, there's my IFR flight plan. The radar is catching up to me. And there's another TFR there above Santa Barbara, also for firefighting. And you can see it's now matching what I'm going to fly. If I zoom out, there's my entire route, right up Victor 27 on the coastline, just the way I wanted. And you notice it gets every little bend in VOR automatically for me. I'm now going to click on Procedures. It's still showing Long Beach, but that's not what I want. So if I click in the search box at the top and change that to KMRY or Monterey, and then tap on the Monterey bar, there's my Monterey approach plates, including my airport diagram. I'm going to scroll through, see the arrow to the right? I'm just going to scroll through to the one I want, which is my preferred approach into Monterey. The ILS or localizer runway 10 right. Going to click Send that to the map. And look, it's right there. Now, it's important that I put in every waypoint of the instrument approach for my safety. I'm not going from PEB straight to the airport. I'm going to be radar vectored to Munso and then inbound on the localizer. So the way to do that is simply rubber band or drag and drop, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. Basically, I'm just going to touch the pink line and hold it till a circle drops up. Then I'm going to drag it to Munso and let go. Then I'll tab the Munso bar and poof, it's put it in. It really is that easy just to drag and rubber band things. It's another way to flight plan, especially useful for instrument approach procedures. So it looks like my chart is up there. Last thing I'm going to do is click Layers. And I'm going to change the map from IFR to sectional. A strong recommendation to instrument instructors and instrument pilots out there, you should never fly IFR on an IFR map. You should have one with you, but you should always do your navigating based on a VFR map because it shows more terrain features which are more useful in emergency. So the VFR sectional is safer in an instrument emergency than an instrument a low altitude map. So I always teach and recommend that everybody fly IFR actually on the VFR sectional view. And that's why I do that. So now if I click split screen, I'll show you my setup for flying IFR. The cool thing about FlyQ is it's not relegated to having a synthetic vision on the left. You can actually do as many different options in the left as in the right. So if you want to show a VFR map and a low altitude map, you can. If you want to show an airports page and a 3D view, you can. And you can move them to the left or to the right. You're not regulated to one. I still, though, do prefer the 3D or the synthetic vision AHRS view on the left. And remember, to get a true AHRS, you're going to need an AHRS capable ADS-B unit like, again, I like the Stratus 2. And it's going to show me everything I need to know. Obviously, I'm not moving right now. I'm now going to click and change some layers on the VFR map. First thing I'd like to do is add some stuff. So if I click on METAR tasks, that's important because if I need to divert in an emergency, I want to know if it's VFR or IFR just by looking at it. I'm going to add some SIGMETs, AirMets, and wow, that thunderstorm's moving in. You can see turbulent stuff happening up in the top right corner. I'm going to turn on some traffic. Then I'm going to add some layers to my synthetic vision view off the left. Everything is pre-selected, but I'm going to make sure and add my terrain awareness system on it. That will color code terrain to let me know if I'm within 1,000 feet or about to hit something. Remember, yellow on a terrain display does not mean you're safe. It means you should execute a climb. In the mountains, yellow means you need to do an urgent climb. Red is you're definitely about to hit something and you need to do an emergency climb. So yellow on a terrain awareness system does not mean you're safe. A good downdraft could still easily take you into that terrain. So yellow means climb, red means emergency climb. That's the way you should treat these devices. All right, so there's some traffic display. And you'll notice in the top center on my sectional map, there is an airliner 14,800 feet above me and climbing. You know, I'm never gonna get that high. So let's eliminate the traffic that's really not important to me. And the way I'm going to do that is click on Settings. Gonna scroll up and you'll see the traffic filter. And I want to make sure that is now turned on so that now it's only going to show people within 3,500 feet of me. It's only going to show people that are important to me. So how important is an electronic flight bag program like FlyQ or any of the others to IFR safety? Well, it's critically important. FlyQ is definitely my favorite. I've used ForeFlight for years. I think it's a great program. There are reasons I like one over the other, but they're both great. And I got to tell you, if you know how to use Garmin, it's fine. If you know how to use WingX, it's fine. The important thing is knowing how to use it, which most people don't. But let me show you how cool it is. And my favorite, absolutely favorite feature of FlyQ, because I'm an instructor, is there's actually a built-in simulator. So you can show students what the flight's going to look like before you go. So here's a pretty standard IFR training flight from Fullerton. After departure, turn right, heading 145, climb to 3,000, and I'm set up for the RNAV Zulu at Long Beach. You can see off to the left, I'm over yellow terrain, which means I'm too close. I better keep climbing. And once I'm 1,000 feet above that terrain, it's going to start going away. It's now going to open up what I call highway in the sky or a 3D box, really a lot like flying a video game. And I got to tell you, the killer in instrument flight is not a vacuum failure. Vacuum failure is you say Mayday, 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 and you take radar vectors to VFR on top. What kills people in IFR is an electrical failure because you've lost all of your navigation. You can, with proper training from an expert, actually shoot a complete non-precision approach very safely only using FlyQ or some of the others. But it takes a lot of practice and a lot of expert training. So you'll notice I'm going to start a teardrop entry. I realize I'm in the procedure turn. I should start my descent down to 2,400. turn back to intercept my course inbound here. My 206 is not actually this fast. I've speeded up the playback by 10 times, but this is pretty much what it looks like. So you notice if I just stay in those pink boxes, I'm going to be pretty good. I've passed OISIP, so I need to be at 1,600 before I get to Gunny. So I'm going to then start my descent there. And this is all part of the vertical planning that you can do, and I'll be happy to demonstrate in some more advanced classes. So let's get down to 1,600 before I get to Gunny. I've just passed Gunny. I now need to start my descent. If this is a WAS approach, down to 297. And you can see I'm a little right of centerline. And it really is just that accurate. So if you've ever taught somebody instrument flying, or if you've ever tried to learn instrument flying, how much easier would this be if you had this? I got to tell you, in many, many ways, I think it's better than a G1000 system because it does more things in a smaller space. And it's a whole heck of a lot cheaper. My Cessna 206 has a Garmin 430 WAS, and my iPad mounted directly underneath that. Remember, the iPad is never legal for primary navigation, but it is designed for situational awareness. And that's what makes you safe. All right, let's go through a couple more questions. So Robert Hendricks actually has a great point. And his statement is one of the problems with FlyQ I've seen is the TFRs. For instance, the firefighting TFR for Big Bear is missing. This is a major safety issue and a major flow with getting accurate situational awareness. Robert, you're 100% right, but it's not relegated to FlyQ. FlyQ and every other program can only display the stuff that's transmitted to the FAA. So when things pop up or are missing, and notoriously, we have presidential TFRs that start earlier than they're supposed to, and they don't show as active on the electronic flight bags until the original time they were programmed. That's one of the biggest reasons you should always get flight following as well as. So yes, you're right, but it's not really the problem of the software as much as the information getting handed down by the FAA. But you're right, and that's why you should always get flight following. Is the weather information, this is from David, hi David, is the weather information only available when you are connected to a wireless network during planning, or does it feed via ADS-B in flight? It does actually both, but the weather products it gets are slightly different. Somebody else asked, is the weather brief, the standard brief that FlyQ generates, is that considered a legal brief? Yes, because the FAA has received and created a log of your tail number along with the flight. So what makes a weather brief legal is actually the ability to prove you did it later. So FlyQ currently uses DUATs. The Lockheed Martin website has its own technology. Other electronic flight bags connect in different ways. But as long as it generates an FAA receipt, then yes, it's legal if you read it. John Turner has a question. John, do you like FlyQ or ForeFlight better? A really good question. I've been the biggest fan of ForeFlight for many years, and I honestly think they have a great program. I switched to FlyQ because I found more things it does better than the other program. They are both great. My personal preference at this point is FlyQ, especially because of some of the advantages it offers to instructors. Majesty, does FlyQ show TAC charts? Yep, if you zoom in, it becomes a TAC chart automatically. Mitchell, how does defaults under setting affect your flight plan creation? Well, it's basically in the aircraft setup and the pilot preferences. You can pre-select altitudes that you want to file, but I always change them in flight plan. The best thing about under the default settings is it will auto-populate everything about your plane for the flight plan. That's why I like it. Can you get a next gen brief? Not currently, but you can always get a next gen brief at 1-800-WXbrief.com. They don't talk to each other yet, but that might be coming in the future. Mitchell, Gary, I'm very used to another program, but this looks really good, especially with the crosswinds info. As a relatively new pilot under 250 hours, I'm always extra cautious about them. You know, I feel the exact same way. Daniel, do you need internet data access in flight to get all the procedures, or does the program download all of them for every airport? Well, you got to set it up, and I'm going to show you that next. One of the coolest things about this particular software program is I call it the double tap. Steve and Keith up at Seattle Avionics calls it the rule of two. They think everything important should be available with no more than 2 taps. I call it the double tap because I'm a fan of Zombieland. If I show you a map, and let's say I need to divert to Victorville in flight because Victorville is always VFR. If I just double tap on that airport, the information will automatically pop up. First thing is, it shows that 3D view. I double click on Victorville and it brings the information right up. So it's always very quick to get the info, and I did that pretty quick. That was actually a recorded movie. You'll see me loading a procedure, putting it on a map. So you can see with the rule of two, or what I call the double tap, how quick it is to divert to another airport in an emergency and get everything I need. The other cool thing about quick diversions is not only all flight programs that I know of, WingX, ForeFlight, Garmin, they all, if you touch 2 fingers, they'll all come up with a ruler saying, hey, it's from here to here, it's this long. But what's really cool about this is if I hold fingers over Victorville in my present position, it not only shows me my distance, how long it will take me and how much fuel, but it shows me a sideways view of terrain, which is really, really cool because it says, hey, you need to get above 9,600 to make this, and no other program does that. So because I'm so into mountain flying, that's one of the reasons I switched to this program as my primary use. The night mode is better than the other programs. So if you simply click on the night mode button, you'll notice it doesn't just invert colors. It keeps the radar colors true, and it keeps terrain features on instrument approach plates true. So it's not the bad iPad night mode, which you should never use on any electronic flight bag. That whole triple click to invert colors is just a bad idea because it's too bright, and if you dim it down, it makes the whole screen bright white, which destroys your night vision. So I like the night mode much, much better on this one. And Daniel, you were talking me about downloads. Well, if I plan a flight from Long Beach to Paradise to Las Vegas up to Boise, Idaho, I'm going to be very, very quickly able to see if I have what I need. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on the downloads button. And you see it actually puts my course lines on a state map. Oh, gee, I don't have any charts for Nevada or Idaho even downloaded. So I know I'm going to need to touch those and do a download. The other way you can double check to make sure you have the current charts before you go is to click the pre-flight checklist, which is by clicking on the little airplane, and it's going to warn you before you go, hey, you don't have the things you need to make this flight. So there's 2 ways to double check that you do have the correct charts. Do you want to talk about some problems that the FAA and pilots are having with all electronic flight bags. Interviewing an FAA inspector for one of my national programs, I found out something really, really scary. Ever since iPads became popular in the cockpit, he's seen a tenfold increase in the number of violations and accidents. Why are iPads making it worse, especially for airspace violations? Well, I'll show you the two biggest reasons. One reason is people get way too close to airspace. Remember, your handheld GPS, an iPad or even an old Garmin 196, is accurate to within about 3 meters of your current position. The current FAA radar knows where you are within about 1 mile. If you've ever wondered why the minimum aircraft separation for IFR traffic is 2 miles laterally, it's because the FAA radar is not very good. No kidding, they know you're somewhere within a mile. Your GPS says, well, you're here within 3 meters. So your handheld device is much more accurate than the current FAA radar. So if you plan a flight from Long Beach down to Carlsbad and you go right next to that restricted area, you are legally clear of the restricted area. You absolutely are. Unfortunately, the FAA radar may see you as being inside the restricted area, and you'll get a violation letter 10 to 14 days later going, guess what? We have an FAA radar track. In other words, we have legal proof showing you were inside a restricted area. And I got to tell you, if you go into an FAA inspector who's done 20 of these in the last 2 weeks and says, well, but I was using my iPad, it's not going to help. You're going to get suspended because they're tired of dealing with it. The important thing to do is not get that letter. Now, if you have tracking software like Cloud Ahoy, which I recommend, and you can prove that you're actually outside of it, you may get outside of punishment, but who wants to spend 2 hours in the FAA office on a Wednesday afternoon arguing your case? It's much, much easier if you all just stay 2 miles away. If you drag your course out to a minimum of 2 miles away from restricted airspace, you'll never get the accidental violation. Same thing with presidential TFRs. They've had so many presidential TFR violations, they've actually changed the punishment matrix that they don't even pursue people who go less than a mile in the TFR and immediate leave because they know you're using an iPad and you're probably actually clear of it. But if you go more than a mile inside or don't immediately leave, it's an automatic suspension of your certificate. There's no discussing it. It's an automatic suspension. The number 2 biggest reason iPads are causing accidents and FAA violations is because, unfortunately, the vast majority of people who buy iPads and the software have never taken any professional training. I don't believe anybody on this webinar would ever recommend a private pilot who trained in a steam gauge airplane buy a G1000 airplane and figure it out while he's flying. Unfortunately, that's how the vast majority of pilots treat electronic flight bags. They never take professional training and they try and do it on their own, which is never good in aviation. Learning to work an advanced technology system by yourself is never a good idea. So let's tell a little story about why this is important. And this is straight from an aviation safety reporting systems report. While flying northeast of Palm Springs, a fighter jet approached very fast, trying to get my attention. I knew something was wrong. I even looked on the iPad to check for TFRs and did not see any. Palm Springs Control Tower told the aircraft northeast of the airport to turn east immediately. There's a TFR for 30 miles around Palm Springs. Sounds like a presidential TFR to me. The fighter jet followed me to the east out of the TFR. The iPad was updated that very morning. But I found the viewing of the TFR feature on the iPad was turned off. He goes on to say that his biggest regret was not taking training. The biggest way to get in trouble with these amazingly cool applications that really can make airspace and flying much, much safer is to not know how to use them correctly. And figuring it out on your own is never a good idea. So how do you find an instructor that's qualified to teach your program? I got a couple questions for you. One, just ask at your local flight school, who uses this program? And an instructor will walk out of the crowd and go, oh yeah, I use that, I teach that. Say, okay, how many years have you been using it? Well, for FlyQ, in my case, I've only been using it for about 2 months. Here's your next question. Do you teach your private pilots to use it? If they say no, they are not comfortable and they don't know how to use it enough that they don't trust it. If they're not teaching their primary students how to use this, they're not good enough to be teaching you either. So you got to pick an experienced instructor. Masterinstructors.org will give you a list of every master instructor in your state. But many flight instructors, especially when they're a little bit younger, try and teach everything and learn it while you're paying them. I was guilty of it as a brand new flight instructor, and many are. Oh, yeah, I can teach that. And then you're paying them whatever you're paying them per hour, and they're trying to figure it out with you. They shouldn't be figuring it out if you're paying them. They should know it. So how long have you been using it, and do you teach it to your primary students? If the answers to both of those are yes, you probably have a pretty good chance of getting an expert in that technology. I am an expert in all things Garmin, but I've never used the Garmin app. So if you come to me for G1000 transition, I got it handled. If you come to me for using the Garmin app, I'm going to refer you to another instructor. You come to me and say, hey, Gary, I'm using FlyQ with a Garmin 430. Well, that's what I got in my plane. If you say, well, Gary, I'm using WingX and an Avidyne panel, I'm going to send you to my buddy Max. So finding the instructor that's truly an expert is very important to you, and I hope that helps you. So I always like to end that part with my favorite education quote, and that is, when we don't learn lessons at the right time, life will always teach us the same lessons at the wrong time, and more that's ending up with a 30 or 90-day pilot suspension because of a TFR violation. So make sure you learn your equipment before you go fly alone, especially in instrument conditions or at night. If you need some more help before I answer some questions, go to pilotsafety.org. I'd love to have you. There's actually a FlyQ page being built right now that we'll have some answers to. I got to tell you, SeattleAvionics.com has some really great resources, some facts, and you should start by reading the owner's manual, which you can download for free off their website. Another feature we have on our website, which I'd love more people to use, is to click on Ask the Experts, because we have 3 of California's 16 master instructors, myself, Captain Jesh, and John Mahaney, as well as an FAA employee, a senior medical examiner, an aviation attorney, 2 different FAA air traffic controllers, both a tower and a center controller, glider, helicopter instructors. We got them all, and they'll all answer your questions for free as long as you promise to keep them short, be patient, it may take us a day or two, and to stop asking us when the FAA is going to revoke the third class medical. We don't know either, but as soon as we hear, we'll let you know. Again, if you go to our website, there's a bunch of free stuff. We'd love to have you. I'm going to fix the missing slides at the beginning. We'll re-record this probably tomorrow. Should be up on our website by tomorrow afternoon or evening. And I'm going to spend just a few more minutes answering as many questions as I possibly can before my voice goes out. Richard, do you see the majority of instructors, examiners sharing that ideology of allowing the EFB? Recommendation when someone encounters an old timer. Many of the older examiners, not older necessarily in age, but based in older technology, are just not familiar with it. What I recommend on every check ride you send a student to is you tell the examiner before you get there. Call the examiner up a week before and say, my student uses FlyQ on the iPad, and they do their flight planning and their weather briefing on that. I'll be sending them with that, as well as backup paper printouts and charts. If you just let them know ahead of time, they're always pretty good. If you ever have an examiner that says you can't use this, that's actually incorrect, and you should contact the FSDO. They are required to accept it, but I've never had that happen. Joseph, he's following along with FlyQ on the iPad and cannot see the weather I'm showing. That's because all of my screens were recorded earlier. So anything anybody's trying to look at now is not going to be there. Is this app updated before flight to assure necessary data is available? Yes, as long as you click the pre-flight button, that little airplane, to double check. Have you ever used a vector-based GPS? This is from Bruce Evans, like the Flight Cheetah. And if so, how do you compare that with FlyQ approach overlays on a map or just the overlay on the approach plate? Bruce, I've never used something like that. I've never even heard of the Flight Cheetah before. So I don't have a real good answer for you, except I like it quite a bit. William, this is actually a pretty common question I get. He thought that the Stratus 2 only worked with ForeFlight. No, that's not correct. FlyQ actually works with more ADS-B and external GPS than any other program out there. So while the Stratus is actually owned partially by ForeFlight and was designed for that program, FlyQ has made sure that it works with their program as well. So I use the Stratus 2 with FlyQ and it works just great. Neil, can you do flight planning from the map screen? Yep, absolutely. You can do everything from the search bar. Terry has a question about a white line on my map showing around the New York airports. Do me a favor, Terry. Take a screenshot of that and email it to me. I'd have to see it to fix it, buddy. Robert Murrell, in the list of recommended iPads, I did not list the basic modern Mini, only the Mini 2.3, because that's what Apple currently sells, and the faster processor really makes a difference. Michael Meath, so I need to replace my iPad. I use it for other things, including email when not on the road. If I have a cellular plan, will I be okay so long as I use my dual GPS in the Wi-Fi mode? Yeah, the dual GPS is great, buddy. I'm going to keep answering questions for at least 5 minutes to see if my voice can handle it. If you need to take off, please do. We really, really appreciate it. We had several hundred people on. And like I said, you'll get a link to watch this on our website by tomorrow night. Many people are saying good job. Thank you. I appreciate all of you for coming. Gary, this is from Robin. Hi, Robin. Gary, nice job. IFR question. Do you carry a full volume of instrument approach plates, or do you print out the anticipated charts? I actually only print out the approach plates for all of my intended airports, including both alternates. Take one of my IFR classes. I'll teach you why you need 2 alternates, not 1. But I do keep a complete set in the airplane, and it may be expired by a session or 2, but it's there if I need it. Robert, do you need more than 16 gigs of memory to work this FlyQ? Yeah, you kind of really do. FlyQ compresses their data quite a bit, but I wouldn't recommend anything under 32, and I was always buy the most memory you can afford. Is it legal to use the WX brief off the software versus calling a WX briefer? It absolutely is, as long as you read everything. Now, Dave has a question that's very specific, and I'm actually going to unmute a special guest today. We have Steve Podrachek, and I probably blew that name, actually attending. He's the president of Seattle Avionics. So I'm going to unmute Steve and see if he would like to answer this one. Steve, Dave would like to know, is it worth paying $400 to upgrade my iLevel ADS-B GPS AHRS to include both ADS-B frequencies?
Hi, thanks. I really appreciate that. It's actually a very interesting question. What it comes down to is a single channel ADS-B receiver is limited in the amount of traffic it can show you. It's a little hard to explain. In fact, I'm sure that Gary has webinars on this, and we've done them too. But what it really comes down to is if you have a single channel ADS-B receiver, like the original iLevel or like the original Stratus or a couple of others, you can only be absolutely certain to see all the traffic if your plane happens to have ADS-B out, which, as we know, most people don't have. When you move to a dual channel receiver, like the new iLevel 2, like the Stratus 2, the Clarity, a lot of other ones like that, then you still have that limitation, but you also, in getting the second channel of ADS-B, will pick up traffic that's being sent from overhead from all the commercial airliners flying. Personally, I prefer to have that added degree of safety. Whether or not it's worth the money is a choice that only you can make. And to be fair, I don't have to pay for my ADS-B receivers, the company does. So I always like to fly with a dual channel receiver myself.
Well, there you go. Thanks from hearing Steve. Okay, so are you required by law to have a current hard copy charts and maps? No, you're required to have the current map. I always carry a backup paper map because iPads break, but of course I also have an iPhone and a backup iPad. A couple people are asking me Mini versus the iPad Air. I like the Mini because it's actually mounted on my panel with a RAM mount and it takes up less space. I never thought the iPad was big and clunky until trying to use it in an airplane. Y'all, I'm going to say goodnight. I'm going to say thank you so much for everybody's questions and participation. My voice is just done. So I'm going to re-record this and get it up for you tomorrow night. It'll be on our website, pilotsafety.org, and click on the FlyQ tab. May not be up till late at night, so if you don't see it tomorrow, make sure you check back on Thursday morning. Y'all, thank you so much for coming. I hope you have a great night, and I hope to see you soon. Anybody who's going to Oshkosh, I'll be there. I'll be speaking 5 times. Come by and say hi. It's my favorite thing to meet everybody in person. We'll see you all soon.